The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening and welcome to the July 26th Westminster City Council meeting. We ask all of you in attendance, and it's wonderful to see so many of you in attendance tonight, to please mute or turn off your cell phone. As of June 14th, the city has resumed meeting in person for city council meetings with the option for virtual participation by council and staff as necessary. In addition to in-person attendance, the community may also participate remotely by watching the live stream on the city YouTube channel or by dialing in by phone with the instructions on the meeting agenda webpage. We continue to support multiple opportunities for public comment, including in-person testimony, email, voicemail, and live remote audio. Many modifications have been made to council chambers for the safety of council, the public, and staff. This includes spacing council on the dais and limiting the number of staff participating in person. The agenda section of the city website is the best place to check for details on participating in council meetings. The web address is www.cityofwestminster.us/agendas. Now I ask all of you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item before us is the consideration of the minutes of the preceding meetings. Do I have a motion? I believe that is Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem DeMont.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to approve the minutes of the July 12th, 2021 meeting as presented.
Is there a second? Councilor Seymour.
I second.
There has been a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes, please say so with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The motion passes. The next item before us are public comments. The public comment portion of the meeting is an opportunity for the public to communicate with the City Council on any topic they choose, unless there is a topic for which a public hearing is also scheduled. This evening, we have one public hearing and one public meeting. The first is item 10A, 2021 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. And the second item is 10B, 2021 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Application. Anyone wishing to speak on those items, please hold your comments until we reach those agenda items later in the evening. The current public comment portion of the public meeting is not intended to be conversational, but rather a direct communication from the public to their representatives. There are now 4 methods available for participation to public comment. You may testify in person, submit written email testimony, record a voicemail to be played back during the meeting, or request to speak live via the remote meeting link through the city clerk's office. Please see the posted agenda for details on how to participate using any of the methods available. At this time, I would ask the city clerk to please summarize the number of participants this evening and to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this time, we have 2 people who have signed up to speak in person, and we will call them in the following order momentarily. First will be David Acunto, followed by Todd Payne. No one asked to join the meeting remotely to give public comment. There are no voicemails for public comment, and no emails were submitted by the deadline. So at this time, I would ask that Mr. Acunto please approach the podium. You have 5 minutes to address the City Council.
Can you hear me? All right. Good evening, honorable members of council. My name is David Acunto, address 8400 Alcott Street, Westminster, Colorado, 80031. Tonight, I come to you as the State Secretary of the Colorado Fraternal Order Police and a member of FOP Lodge 25. The Westminster Police Department is in a troubling state. We are experiencing the highest attrition rate in the history of our great city over the past 2 years, with no clear relief in sight. Officers cope with low morale, poor staffing, improper micromanagement, drastically surging call load, and increased population density. All the while, we deal with state legislation, policy updates, procedural changes, and protocols that seem to change every single day, if not by the hour. There is societal pressure to perform an imperfect job perfectly, without error, and without a hint of malapropos. Day in, day out, the officers of the Westminster Police Department suit up, put a badge on our chest, and serve the city of Westminster with honor, duty, and respect. On multiple occasions in recent years, we have tried to make our voices heard and express our concerns. Suggestions and ideas in accordance with the established city policy and police department procedures, the line of communications that are currently open to us are not effective and are designed for management to ignore the collective voices of our officers. The Westminster police officers need to know that they are being heard and there's meaningful dialogue between labor and management. The most recent placement of Chief Carlson and Deputy Chief Reeves on administrative leave became necessary because of the failure of the system to provide any real method for officers to communicate in any candid manner. City staff is presenting a Resolution 23, Item 10F, and recommending it to be adopted. Resolution 23 advises council that city staff has met with Lodge 25 president and vice president, sworn officers, and staff to discuss their concerns. While this is a step in the right direction, the resolution fails to provide any formalized method to address the issues. These meetings with the FOP, the president, and the vice president cannot be productive if there is not some accountability to achieve specific results, and the resolution does not identify any of them. Accepting this resolution does not solve anything, and it's not even a short-term fix to a long-term problem. This resolution is viewed by the membership of the FOP 25 that our concerns, again, are not being heard, and that is, it's a way to begin a conversation that will eventually lead to the same status quo. Repeating the same processes, discussions, and meetings without any specific goals or objectives and expecting results is not an effective way of problem solving. Nothing will change unless we open the lines of communication in a true partnership that allows officers a place and to hear their voices and get it on the table. Every single elected official on this dais has at one point or another agreed that they would support collective bargaining. It is time to put those words into action. It is time to show the honorable men and women that serve this community, your words are not empty promises, but are actionable and true. What we are asking for is our voices to be heard and equally valued. We are asking for this council to direct staff to bring a charter amendment to this year for the regularly scheduled election in November, or prepare a draft amendment to include the Westminster Police Department in the already established collective bargaining municipal code to align us with the fire department. On a personal note, our officers listen. We listen in roll calls when you come and you make promises that you would support collective bargaining. We listen to your campaign speeches. We listen to your council meetings. We listen to what you say. Make the right decision. Show us what you mean. City staff works for you. They don't tell you what to do. You direct them. Thank you.
The next speaker is Todd Payne. You have 5 minutes to address the City Council.
My name is Todd Payne. I reside at 8885 Flat Top Way in Arvada, and I am employed as a police officer for the City of Westminster. And with all due respect, I have to totally disagree with what was just said. All of the things that he laid out initially cannot be solved through collective bargaining. The fact that the state legislature has passed some horrible legislation won't be changed or affected by collective bargaining. The fact that the citizens may or may not appreciate us can't be changed by collective bargaining. I think collective bargaining just brings an adversarial role into what is happening at the Westminster Police Department. The fact that we've had a high attrition rate has nothing to do with the fact that we don't have collective bargaining and won't be solved by collective bargaining. I think it has to do with the fact that several years ago, we changed from a defined contribution to a defined benefit. And as those people that were nearing the end of their tenure with the police department were able to retire, they've retired. And it just so happens that it's happened at a horrible time. We're going through COVID and we're going through all of these other things, and we've had this huge retirement. And if you'll take the time to look at the people that are retiring, the vast majority of them have a long tenure with the Westminster Police Department. And it's not unheard of. It's not a unexpected thing, or it's not because of the environment of the Westminster Police Department. And when he talked about our voices not being heard, the chief comes to roll call and tells us what's going on. He'll come to roll call usually about once a quarter. He tells us what's going on, different projects that are going on and all of that. And when he's done talking, he says, is there anything that you guys want to bring up? Any questions that you have, anything like that? Usually it's just crickets, that nobody says anything. And when things are said, I feel like there's a very good response. Chief Carlson was out on vacation and Chief Reeves came to roll call and asked that same thing and then said, hey, I want to meet with several of you just in person, out of roll call. Anybody willing to do that? And there were several people in the roll call that I was at that went and met with Chief Reeves. And the things that were brought up in that meeting were quickly addressed. We brought up the new evidence.com and how we were having to upload pictures to evidence.com and how difficult that was. And they immediately made a change. Things have been brought up, such as the pay that we have or the benefits. And those things have been immediately looked at. And I know that you guys are currently looking at ways to address pay at the police department and benefits that we have. And so to me, I see the exact opposite of what was just presented, and that there are ways for us to talk to the command staff, and the command staff is responsive to our needs. And I just wanted to present a flip side to what was just presented, and that there are several people that I've talked to at the police department that feel the same way.
Madam Mayor, that concludes all of our public speakers for this evening.
I recognize no one else signed up to make comments, but if anyone, after hearing the last few comments, has something they'd like to add, please go register with our city clerk. Seeing no additional takers, we will move on. The next item before us are city council well, actually, it's not on here, but it should be comments from our city manager. Do you have any comments?
I do, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to comment this evening. I have two items I want to address. An ongoing update to our discussion on collective bargaining with members of FOP, local, and our police officers, and also future water rates. First of all, the room is full of city employees tonight. Welcome all of you. Glad to have you here. Glad to have a great turnout in the police department. I've enjoyed the opportunity to meet in person in the last few weeks with our staff, and we have an outstanding staff. And I just want to express my appreciation to all of you that are here this evening and dozens that are on this call with us to answer questions of a very packed agenda. And related to collective bargaining, Deputy City Manager Barbara Opie, who oversees the police department, and myself have attended a couple of additional meetings that were open to police officers. That happened last week, and we had a follow-up meeting with FOP. Those were productive meetings. I felt like the officers were very forthcoming, brought very specific ideas. My pledge to you was to make the rounds and do that as completely as I could. We've scheduled 3 meetings that were open. We haven't hit really enough officers yet, in my view. We're going to continue those and make those available in some smaller groups starting here in the next week or so. And I'll get back to you with a report similar to what we did with the fire department about 5 years ago that summarizes the comments that we've received. But I want to applaud the police officer employees in front of all of you and the workforce, because they've had great ideas and great feedback, and I think it's been a great dialogue. It's, as I've told them, an honor for me to be in this position to represent all employees of the city, and I feel a big responsibility. And of course, I'll give you my best recommendations as to what we think from my office can be done to develop the best working conditions possible in all departments, but in this case, through collective bargaining or not, in the police department. There is an item on the agenda tonight. I'll be available, of course, to answer questions as staff will when we get to that item. I'd like to now switch directions a little bit and talk about water rates. And I'm here tonight really to seek your guidance and feedback. Just to summarize, if anybody has not heard about water that's listening to this call tonight, I'd be a little surprised, but I will say that for those folks that are on the call that are not close to this on a daily basis, like many of us, we've been talking about Water 2025 for literally several years, and Water 2025 is the replacement of the Semper Water Treatment Facility and related improvements to the system to meet the needs of our city moving forward. A facility that was built in 1969 and will eventually need to be replaced. What's at question now relate to the rates that we need to charge in water to pay for that replacement. The replacement and maintenance and repair of infrastructure within the utility is a generationally based enterprise. In other words, people back many years ago built the utility originally back in 1969. We had a lot of growth towards the end of the 20th century, and that growth brought water taps that paid for a lot of the infrastructure in our system. And we're 40 years beyond that now. We're back at that time when it's all of our responsibility as utility customers to make sure that we've got clean and reliable water moving into the rest of the 21st century. So in front of you is this water plant replacement and related improvements, including sewer improvements. We've brought to you previously a rate increase of 3.98%. We recommended for 2022, and that did not pass. I pledged to look at alternatives and suggested that evening that we look at what the real impacts, if you couldn't approve the 3.98%, which included all the capital needs that we'd have moving forward, could we at least keep pace with the rate of inflation? Unfortunately, I'm here this evening to report to you that the rate of inflation is even greater than what it was when we anticipated that several weeks ago. Right now, looking internally within our operation, the increase in cost just in labor is about 3%. And when you look at the non-labor operation costs, and this is not capital, those are trending between 1.5 and 5%. So before we ever get to capital, we're looking at an increase this year of between 4 and 5% at a minimum, and maybe as high as 8 or 9% in costs. So Guess between the proverbial rock and a hard place, trying to figure out how we continue to move forward and meet the requirements of having a water treatment plant replaced by 2025 or soon thereafter, and meet the obligation that I have under the charter to provide that kind of recommendation to you. We've looked at the option. It was also mentioned by some of you that you'd like to see an audit. We looked at an outside audit, and I'm prepared to talk about that in some detail tonight if you'd like to, but I can't bring that tonight as a recommendation. It's going to be costly, it's going to require time, and it's going to require staff resources. So cost outside consulting, cost in staff resources, and a cost in time. And, as your city manager, I'm confident in the information we provided to you. If you can be specific with me as to how to best help provide you with the information that you can have the confidence in that information that I do, I'd be happy to try to do that. But I would tell you this evening, I'm just laying this out for you and telling you that we've got to adopt a fee for 2022. I've got to develop a budget for 2022 around that fee. I need to do that starting in August. You'll be required to adopt a budget in September, and we're running out of time. So feedback is what I seek this evening on that subject. So thank you again for an opportunity to comment tonight. I look forward to that feedback in whatever way you can provide that to me. The sooner the better. If you'd like to discuss it tonight, we can do that now or under an item later on the agenda that's an other issues item that I think is permitted here, but however you'd like to proceed, Mayor. And I'll close by saying thanks for all of you for being here this evening. Appreciate you a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Before we go into council comments and before I kind of evaluate how best we can give you that feedback and direction, I am going to ask City Clerk Ms. Parker to go through the roll call.
Absolutely. Mayor Pro Tem Demott,
Present.
Mayor Seitz,
Here.
Councilor Seymour,
Here.
Councilor Scully, here, Councilor Smith, present, and Councilor Bowles.
Here.
So it sounds like you're asking for direction tonight, at least to give you enough information in order for you to come back with some alternatives. Am I hearing you accurately?
Yes, that's exactly it. And we have an alternative on the table that's 3.98%, which we believe meets the needs of paying for the cost of the utility to operate this year and keep us on schedule with Water 2025. Even with the increases that we have, we aren't going to recommend anything higher. The information is new, but we'll make that work. And if that that's a number that you've not approved, and so I don't have an expectation of that. But I would like to know if there's a number that you would approve. And, then what I would do with that number is present to you what the impact of that number is, be really specific as we can about which of the capital types of items would need to be delayed to meet that lower number.
Okay. Because this wasn't agendized, I don't think, my guess is the information would be more thoroughly thought through and complete if we allowed members of council to email that to you by perhaps end of business Wednesday. Is that appropriate? Do my colleagues disagree? Would you rather have a conversation about it right now? And I would actually feel free to include your thoughts about it in your comments, but I think we should still allow other members of council to provide written, thoughtful feedback by end of close Wednesday if you are, if that fits. Okay. Is Wednesday too late? Okay. You need it to be able to post for this study session on, okay. With that being said, I'm going to ask council if anyone has comments on this item before we go into council comments. And I apologize. We have a little screen up here that lets me know who has turned on their lights because I can't see everybody's lights and it is not functioning. So I can't see Councilor Smith if you have a light on. You do? Okay. Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. while this isn't agendized, and I do believe in transparency and all of us discussing it, I think it's an important enough topic that it's not emailed, that we do talk amongst ourselves as far as the progress moving forward. So I do have a little reservation. I know that we're under a time crunch, but I do feel like this is an important enough topic that it needs to be transparent in a full public setting that we're talking amongst ourselves.
So my understanding is this is just compiling the questions, not making any policy determinations, so that staff can have an accurate and full staff report that we will then discuss the results of that. That's what my understanding is, but I may have misheard or misunderstood.
However you'd like to comment, and however you'd like to provide that will be appreciated. There is an agenda item under my report called Comments and Discussion Regarding Water 2025. It doesn't go to specifically the rate. And I understand that, appreciate that, and your meeting and your process, but we can put it back on the agenda next week and have that conversation. You can provide questions in the interim for me that would help. I'm trying to make sure that we don't push this so many meetings that I can't get something in front of you. And the more information that I receive, the better. You're ultimately going to vote on this in a public session. And so I'll remind you of that's going to happen. I just want to stay out in front of that. So thank you.
Councilor Smith?
If it's questions, I think that we can certainly send them to City Manager Tripp. But I prefer to have an open dialogue of questions. It's an important enough topic that we've seen throughout the community for some time now that I think that it'd be worth more of a conversation together, more of a question and answer together. That's just my take.
No, I think that that's a good point. My concern tonight was just we might not all have our thoughts collected on this issue, and I wanted to give time to every member of council. Obviously, I didn't have concerns, but wanting to make sure you have a full list of your concerns and we get them all answered. If people want to talk about their concerns tonight in the public record, you can definitely use your city council comments as an opportunity for that. So I'd see the next Mayor Pro Tem. It looks like you have a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm along the same lines as Councilor Smith that it's not the not understanding that we can compile questions. It's that oftentimes when I hear my colleagues' questions, I come up with other questions. So I think that it's a better dialogue when we're able to ask questions as a group, because the conversation spurs different paths for me anyway. I will share a couple things that I think have been consistent as far as like my view of this particular topic. And City Manager Tripp alluded to some of those. I know that I believe I was the one who initially called for an audit. I still believe that that's something that's necessary, both for parts of trust with some counselors such as myself, as well as the public. One of the things that I'm trying to understand with the topic is this the right path? And I know I've brought that up before, because talking to former city managers and people who worked in the water department, I understand the idea of deferred maintenance, but I've never heard the deferred maintenance that said why there wasn't a water plant in the plan. And if I talked to people who were here before, there was not a water plant in the plan. And that is the biggest driving cost, from my understanding, to what the water rate increases are. So trying to understand what changed in the city to dictate replacing that water plant in 2025 is really where I'm uncomfortable. So I want to at least make it a discussion point, because I know that you're hesitant or don't think that it's necessary to do a full audit. But that's really what I'm trying to understand with even the request of an audit, is how did we get from the plan prior to your administration to where we are at today, that's the right path forward. And I haven't went as far as to say 100%, I don't think that's the right path. I'm uncomfortable saying that is the path, and I have not been convinced of it. And I think that one of the things that's important in this job is that I have pretty reasonable certainty with a decision like that if I'm going to put a vote behind it. The people put a great weight and responsibility with each member of this council. And, I'm just not there with it. So I'm trying to understand some of the things that I'm uncomfortable with in a way that maybe might make me comfortable, or maybe they'll solidify my position, if that makes sense.
Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So first of all, I'm trying to understand the process here. So we're going to submit questions by Wednesday, and then we would have a public discussion on Monday in our study session. Am I understanding this correctly?
I'm not sure if that second portion is correct. I think people tonight can bring up, just as Mayor Pro Tem, I think, did a great job at addressing his questions to give us kind of a starting point. I just wanted to make sure people had an opportunity, if a question comes to their mind, that they just, maybe didn't come prepared tonight for this conversation, that they'd still have ample opportunity to submit it. And then I believe staff was going to take those questions and answer them and then provide us with some alternatives. And that's when we would have a more public discussion. But I think I would turn this over to City Manager Tripp, because I'm making a few assumptions here based off of what I heard.
I think given the time frame, if it's not Monday, probably the first thing we'll do is come back after that with alternative numbers. And I would have preferred to maybe have a little more feedback. And one thing I'll mention, because Mayor Pro Tem's brought this issue of the reliability of, or the trust and verifiability of the information that we have. If any of you have information you could provide to me as to where the information you're getting is coming from, I'd be happy to go talk to those folks. I've actually reached out to some former employees of past administrations, and I'd be happy to do more of that. As I mentioned before, I've got confidence in our work, but I'm willing to talk to anybody and listen to anybody's feedback on this. So if you can provide that, that might be instructive. But Mayor, I think that it's probably desirable to talk about it next week if we can.
Okay. So I do have questions. I have faith in our staff. I believe that they are giving us good information, that we do need a new plant, that the increase is necessary. I understand all of that, and I believe in that. Where I am concerned still is the pandemic. We are not out of this. We have people coming out of a moratorium on eviction notice, and we don't know how that's going to impact people. We still have high unemployment rates. We have high inflation, and now we want to throw an increase on water rates on people. And I'm very nervous about how that's going to impact our community. I'm growing more comfortable with an increase because I understand the need and I understand the necessity, but I'm still very concerned about this pandemic. And I think I asked to understand or have explained why we couldn't maybe take the increase and spread it evenly over coming years and bypass an increase this year so that we could give a break to the residents for the pandemic, and why we couldn't move water 2025 to possibly water 2027. And I don't think I've had that addressed yet. And if I have, I apologize if I've missed it, but I don't think I've heard an answer on that yet. And I would like some understanding of that. So that's where I stand. That's my biggest question.
Thank you, Councilor Scully. Are there any other questions on this item? If not, I will open up City Council comments. Okay, seeing no other comments on this, please do. I know there are a lot of questions on water rates that I think people want to have answered or addressed. Please do be sure to get those in by the end of business on Wednesday. It appears, does anyone have City Council comments? Anything they want to report from this last week? Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last week, I brought up the fact that I attended virtually the Colorado Municipal League 2021 legislative wrap-up. And I wanted to hold those comments for this evening because in this evening's after meeting, we'll be getting a report from our lobbying group on the wrap-up as well. in dealing with some of those issues. But, and I really hope people have the opportunity to listen to that. Because this last year's session, in some ways, was an assault on our residents and their safety. And I think it's appropriate tonight to consider in the audience here. There was 2 Senate bills that came out of this that were attempted to come out of the session. Senate Bill 62, which then died and then was resurrected as Senate Bill 272. Thankfully, and I want to publicly thank our legislator, Shannon Byrd, for killing that bill in committee, because it would have institutionalized the catch and release of criminals that we have seen over this last year. And had there not ever been a social study of ongoing what happens when you continue to release criminals into our society, we saw it this last year. And I'm sure that has absolutely not helped the morale at our police department. When you work hard, when you swear an oath to defend the citizens, and because of our system, you have to let those people go, that's a tremendous burden to take home with you. So I am incredibly grateful to Representative Byrd for killing that in committee, along with our neighboring city representative, Matt Gray. But the key to legislation is not always what was here this session, but what are the thoughts this summer moving forward? Because that initial bill, 62, did not have a great deal of pre-work that you normally see on a topic like that. And so many stakeholders had the opportunity to weigh in after the fact. Part of that too is the smart people at CML kind of left a thought in the line in what's going to happen this next year. And I think that's important for us to pay attention. There are still thoughts of limiting the authority of police officers to make arrests for lower level offenses. Limitations on the authority of courts to impose cash bail. Limitations on police department actions against juveniles in school settings. Limitations on police department actions in response to protest. Limitations on use of no-knock warrants. Limitations on PD collections of biometrics. And then further refinement, if that's what you want to call it, on use of force standards that started with SB 217 that has continued to be refined and continues to leave our officers at a loss. I guess I would have to say that. So I think it's important that we pay attention to legislation. We act in the summer before the next session. We work together. I want to thank my colleagues also. We, as a body, decided to not support 62. And I would hope that we would work with our lobbyists, both our city's contract lobbyists and CML, to make sure that our residents are protected and that our officers are defended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The next councillor I think who would like to speak is Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week I attended the DRCOG meeting, and some key items that had come out of that meeting were that DRCOG approved the project extension for Westminster's US 36 Church Ranch Station Multimodal Access Improvements Project, which would construct safety improvements on the US 36 off-ramps at Church Ranch Boulevard in order to reduce vehicular speed on the right turn ramps and construct a new pedestrian bicycle path from Church Ranch Boulevard to the RTD bus loading platform. And that was approved with a deadline of no later than September 30th of 2021 of this year. And then also to note, the Northwest Rail study from RTD, staff brought it to the board. The board did not like the first numbers cost-wise coming forward and directed staff to reduce the cost, which would ultimately reduce the scope and cost. And RTD staff will formally bring that back to the RTD board on August 10th. And then finally, so Mayor Pro Tem Damat had sent an email at the beginning of the month to formally get a vote by council to direct staff to look into the CBA with our police department. And then I had followed up with some questions. Looking at our packet, it didn't look like there was a formal agendized item. There is discussion of one that could potentially happen, but as I mentioned, it's not my favorite way to govern or to provide a service, but I think it's a necessity and necessary to move forward with this formal consideration. So I look forward to talking with my colleagues more when this vote comes up later tonight.
Any other members of council? Okay. I apologize, Mayor Pro Tem Demont.
No problem. I just wanted to actually take a minute to thank all you who serve this city. I see a lot of our police officers here tonight. So first and foremost, thanks for keeping this community safe and showing up at work. I know the last 18 months have probably been the roughest in your profession. So the fact that you continue to do what you do, I very much appreciate it. And I wanted to at least take a moment to thank you for myself, my family.
Councilor Bowles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I also want to join Mayor Pro Tem Demott in thanking you for being here tonight. It makes our job much better and easier when you're here and share your thoughts. And so thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for your service. We appreciate it very much. And then I also wanted to finally say I had a very busy week last week. And I want to say I'm glad I'm here tonight. Very happy about that. I look forward to a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bowles. I'm also happy you are here. On Tuesday of last week, I was able to attend and speak at the Adams County Regional Economic Partnership. They had a site selector tour for all of Adams County, not just Westminster. For those of you who are not familiar with site selectors, and I was not prior to being on city council, it's an interesting job where you travel the country looking for potential headquarters for your clients. So various, a Pepsi Cola or somebody who makes tires, right? The different types of industries, seeing if it's a good fit. So it's kind of like an economic dating game. I had the privilege of getting to speak about our community at the dinner event that was hosted for these site selectors. And when you stand in front of a crowd and get to talk about the community you live in, it is hard not to have a little bit of pride burst through. This is a wonderful community. I am so proud of Westminster and all of our accomplishments. And I really do think we stand apart from our peers. I have said many times and at roll calls that you can't have anything else if you don't have a safe community. It's a cornerstone and one of the promises we make. Oh goodness, something's going on. But I did just want to say thank you to ensuring that our residents feel safe in their neighborhoods. That's a value I know I share with every single member of this council. With that being said, we're going to go to the next item on our agenda, which is appointments and resignations. We have none tonight. It's the consent agenda. So the consent agenda is a group of routine matters to be acted on with a single motion and vote. Council, at this time, does any member wish to remove an item for a separate discussion? It appears, Councilor Bowles, nope, just waiting to make the motion. Seeing none at this time, I will take a motion to consider the consent agenda. Councilor Bowles.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to adopt the consent agenda items 8A through 8B.
Is there a second? Councilor Scully?
I second.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott,
Yes.
Mayor Seitz,
Yes.
Councilor Seymour,
Yes.
Councilor Scully,
Yes.
Councilor Smith,
Yes.
and Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
The consent agenda passes on a vote of 6-0.
All right, the next item before us is item 10A1, and it's to hold a public hearing on the proposed 2021 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. It is now 7:43 p.m. At this time, we will open up the public hearing, which will begin with a staff presentation, followed by a period for questions and comments from the City Council and comments from the public. Mr. Tripp, will you please introduce the staff presentation on this item?
Thank you, Mayor. This will go to Chase Evans of the Community Development Department.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Don, for the introduction. Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council, thank you for the opportunity tonight to discuss with you the city's process that went into developing the draft 2021 Annual Action Plan. And actually, before I go any further, we do have a slide deck. Thank you. Go ahead and advance it to the next slide. Thank you. As I said, we are going over tonight the draft 2021 Annual Action Plan. And as with anything that city staff brings to City Council for a recommendation, we always want to make sure that those items are in alignment with the city's vision, which is that we are a thriving community of safe neighborhoods and beautiful open space that is sustainable and inclusive. And in this instance, we certainly believe that this draft 2021 Annual Action Plan, or AAP, does indeed meet that vision statement. Next slide, please. However, in addition to meeting the city's vision statement, we also have to make sure that the annual action plan is in alignment with the HUD, or the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's national objectives. HUD has 3 total national objectives, and those are to benefit low and moderate income persons, 2, which is to aid in the prevention or elimination of slums or blight, as well as meeting a need having particular urgency. Primarily tonight, we're going to focus on that first national objective, which is to benefit low and moderate income persons. And the reason for that is actually termed the primary objective, as at least 70% of the city's CDBG funds have to be spent towards that national objective to benefit low and moderate income persons. This objective includes things such as housing activities or area benefits, such as the Hooker Street Pedestrian Improvement Project that I'll touch on later in this presentation. Next slide, please. As council may recall, city staff brought before council the 2020-2024 consolidated plan in November of 2020. HUD requires that the city as an entitlement community file a consolidated plan every 5 years, as well as filing an annual action plan every year. This 2021 annual action plan is in alignment with the goals and projects that were defined within the city's 5-year consolidated plan. The annual action plan also relies on some of the community input, economic data, and past CDBG investments that are detailed within the consolidated plan. Next slide, please. The consolidated plan goals and projects are presented on this slide. As you'll see, there are actually 3 buckets. However, there's only 2 goals. The first goal is to increase and preserve affordable housing, and the second goal is the infrastructure, streetscape, and pedestrian improvements. In addition to that, the CDBG or the HUD guidelines allow the city to use up to 20% of its annual program income to pay for administrative costs such as staff salaries, consultants, planning, and other communications. Within the increase and preserve affordable housing goal, the city has 3 projects, and then within the infrastructure, streetscape, and pedestrian improvements goal, the city has 1 project. The first increase in preserve affordable housing goal is the emergency and essential home repair program. This program has provided over 90 grants in the past 5 years to low and moderate income homeowners to make essential repairs. These repairs often improve safety upgrades that allow individuals to age in place and frequently include items such as water heaters or furnace replacements. Because this is based on residents' incomes, it is not geographically focused, and it can be applied to residents that meet the income requirements throughout the city. The second project within this goal is the preservation of affordable multifamily housing. For this project, CDBG funds may be used to help preserve and improve existing affordable housing. This goal or this program is set up to provide safety and other improvements to ensure that the city's aging housing stock continues to be affordable and safe for residents for years to come. The last program or project within this goal is the affordable housing site preparation. While CDBG funds cannot be used for the development of affordable housing, CDBG funds can be used for certain sidewalk and streetscape improvements that can then help offset some of the overall costs of affordable housing. So this is a project or program that is geared towards helping reduce the financial burden of developing new affordable housing within the city. And then lastly, that second goal, the infrastructure and streetscape improvements, the city right now is finishing up its first project under that goal, and that is the Hooker Street Improvements project. This project includes streetscape and lighting improvements on Hooker Street going south from 72nd Avenue to 71st Avenue. And this provides improved ADA accessibility as well as lighting to make pedestrian pathway from 72nd Avenue to the Westminster Station Transit Center safer in compliance with ADA requirements. Next slide, please. As I mentioned at the beginning, the data input from the consolidated plan is considered within the 2021 annual action plan. However, we also do significant outreach to support the 2021 annual action plan. So I'll just give a brief overview of some of the steps that staff has taken so far this year. That began in June 15th of 2021, where notice was provided of the upcoming annual action plan being posted. This was done both on social media as well as via community newsletters. On June 21st of 21, city staff provided an information-only memo to City Council that provided an overview of the AAP as well as the public outreach process. On June 26th, the draft annual action plan was published on the city's CDBG website for a 30-day public comment period. Notice of this posting was provided via social media, Twitter and Facebook, as well as sent to nonprofit partners to share with their clients and residents. On June 30th, a virtual community meeting was held to solicit input. And then July 10th, the notice for tonight's hearing was published, as well as several times since then, including on July 19th, more information was provided. To date, all of the public comment that has been received was included within the agenda packet, as well as any additional public hearing that we hear tonight will also be included within the 2021 AAP that is submitted to HUD. Next slide. The city's program income for 2021 for the CDBG program is $609,997. As I mentioned, 20% of those funds can be applied to administrative costs. That's the $121,999. We always take the full 20% that is allocated. If we do not use the full 20%, we actually can reprogram and reallocate those funds to future programs in following years. The remaining funds, which is approximately $488,000, was roughly split between the two goals outlined in the 2020-2024 consolidated plan. So $240,000 went to the affordable housing goal, and another $247,000 went to the infrastructure and streetscape goal. We intentionally reduced the amount that was applied to the emergency and essential home repair program and reduced that to $40,000, as there was additional carryover funds from the prior years. We do not anticipate running out of funds in the near future. As I mentioned, because we have two goals, we wanted to be mindful of both of those goals and provide roughly equal funding for those two goals. You'll see that the affordable housing site prep project received no recommended funding. And that is because this program is really specific on a case-by-case basis with a specific affordable housing project. At this time, staff have not identified a potential project. So in this case, we recommend $0 being allocated to the affordable housing site prep project. Next slide, please. So just to recap and discuss the next steps, tonight is the City Council public hearing. And assuming that City Council accepts the 2021 annual action plan, the second reading of the supplemental appropriation will be back before City Council on August 9th. From July 27th to August 15th, staff will work on completing the annual action plan, as well as preparing the filings that will be submitted to HUD. And then on August 16th, the final 2021 annual action plan will be submitted to HUD with our consortium partner, Adams County. That concludes our brief presentation for tonight. I'd like to open it up to any questions, as well as if there's any other public comments for tonight.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from council at this time? Seeing no other questions from my colleagues, I will open this up to public for this hearing. There are now 4 methods available to participate in the public hearing. You may testify in person, submit written email testimony, record a voicemail to be played during the meeting, or request to speak live via remote meeting link through the city clerk's office. At this time, I would ask the city clerk to please summarize the number of participants this evening and introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For this public hearing, we received 2 emails that were submitted by the deadline and forwarded to council and added to the online packet today. We also received 1 voicemail, which we will play back shortly. And there is 1 person who requested to speak live via the meeting link who is in attendance. No member of the public requested to speak live here in chambers. So at this time, we will begin with Jason McCullough, who is our remote participant. Mr. McCullough, you can go ahead and unmute yourself at this time and address the City Council.
Hello, my name is Jason McCullough. Can everyone hear me okay? Just want to make sure. Yes, great. I work for Brothers Redevelopment Incorporated. We're a 50-year-old Denver-based nonprofit. We work on affordable housing issues. Our mission is to provide affordable housing and affordable housing solutions for low-income, disabled, and senior residents in the areas we work in. We partner with the City of Westminster, administering and executing the emergency and essential home repair program, and have done so for the last year or so. Obviously, this last year was a little out of the ordinary. It was very difficult to serve the public in that we could not be around the public that much. So, but I wanted to talk about just what these CDBG funds allow us to do for the City of Westminster and for all the communities that participate in these HUD funds. We use these for low-income, specifically low-income housing issues. These are existing homes in Westminster that are in need of repair in order for the homeowner to age in place or continue to be a Westminster resident. The majority of our clients are kind of my classic client is the average is they're 72 years old. They are a woman. They've owned their home and lived in Westminster for 30 plus years, and they are a widow. So from that generation, a lot of these folks do not have the financial means anymore, or a husband or family members that close by that can help them with these major home issues like my water heater broke, my furnace doesn't work anymore. I can't use a cane anymore. I'm in a walker and I can't get up my stairs. Inside the house, just age and weather-related issues. We use these funds to take care of those kinds of issues to allow folks to continue to reside in their homes. The biggest thing the CDBG funds offer, these programs like essential and emergency home repair, it allows us to respond where no one else can. We have a saying at Brothers Redevelopment, we help those that no one else can help. And with these funds, with the city, you're allowing us to do this work and continue to help people age in place in Westminster. I don't want to take too much longer, but I will like to list off a few of the items that we've performed just this last year, even during COVID, with our crews and our approved subcontractors. We have replaced wheelchair ramps. We have built custom safety rails for the front of a home so that a senior woman could get in into and out of her home without falling. We've replaced a front porch that was no longer usable. We've done several electrical repairs that allowed a house to be more safely used and eliminated fire risk. We've also done sewer repair, age and weather related exterior repairs to homes, which honestly helps to stabilize the home, draws attention to the resident, and stabilizes the neighborhood. We've also done tree removal. I won't say his name because he's not here, but an 80-plus-year-old resident who was more worried about his dead tree falling on the neighbor's house and hurting the kids or their property than he was about it falling on his house. But we were able to remove it, and he was about as happy as I've ever seen anybody to have anything done at their house. We've also done a lot of fall risk work. The average fall for a senior costs about $4,000. That doesn't count the $600 to $1,200 ambulance ride. So doing things like carpet replacement with like a non-slip flooring, or adding bars, grab bars, and grab points inside a home can greatly reduce fall risk for senior households, and it greatly increases their ability to age in place. And finally, we've replaced furnaces and we've replaced water heaters. And this allows people to live in their homes with more comfort, more independence. Even in the best of times, a senior household, being one or two people, has a hard time dealing with these large ticket items that take place only every 10 to 20 years. And through this grant program, we're able to give them a little help up so that they can remain in the house that they've lived in for several decades, and also remain a strong Westminster resident and help the community to stabilize itself. So if you care about your constituency, which I know you do, I hope you will consider continuing with the CDBG annual action plan. We will be working on messaging and outreach and trying to increase the visibility of this program because it is a really impactful one. The largest growing demographic in Colorado is the senior demographic. There's only going to be more need for these kinds of services. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. City Clerk Parker, are there?
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, we have one voicemail for this public hearing, and I would ask that we queue that up and play it. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor Seitz, Mayor Pro Tem DeMott, and City Councilors, this is Karen Fox Elwell, the President and CEO of Growing Home. And it's my honor today to testify and express Growing Home's strong support of the 2021 CDBG Annual Action Plan. I have read a draft of this plan and also attended the virtual community meeting on June 30th. As many of you know, Growing Home is a strong partner of the City of Westminster in working towards a more thriving and equitable North Metro Denver area, one family at a time. We are grateful to the city for your investment of CARES Act funding, Human Services Board funding, and other resources over the years to support our food access and housing programs, among others. Over the past couple years, I have been in ongoing conversations with the city staff about the need for the City of Westminster to dedicate community development block grant dollars to directly serve low and moderate income households, as other municipalities in the greater Denver area do with these resources. In 2019, when provided the opportunity to comment on the use of CDBG funds, I wrote that while we understood that up to that point, the city's choice to allocate the majority of the 2018 funding to the administrative cost and debt repayment, we hoped that once the debt is paid down, that the city would consider allocating the funding to services that support low and moderate income residents. I was so excited to see that this feedback was taken into consideration in the creation of the existing proposed plan being presented today. I am particularly excited to see the plan include the preservation of affordable housing and $240,000 allocated to rehab 20 units. At Growing Home, we see every day the need to both preserve and create more affordable housing. We hear stories daily of it is for families to keep food on the table and a roof over their head. The preservation of affordable housing in Westminster is so needed. It is essential that available affordable housing that residents currently enjoy is made better and also available for the future. This CDBG plan works towards that end. As some of you know, in addition to the wide variety of services that Growing Home offers, we own a 20-unit affordable housing apartment building in Westminster called the Westchester Apartments. Growing Home purchased this building in 2005 with partial support from the city home funds. These units are 30% to 60% of area median income, meeting the definition of low and moderate income. At Growing Home, we know that we have needs in Westchester, like and great to make our affordable housing better and safer for our community. If given the opportunity, we would be excited to apply for any requests for proposals put forth by the city for these funds. If received, this funding would ensure that our Westchester Apartments is low and moderate income families with better quality and safer affordable housing for years to come. So thank you so much for your time tonight and for your consideration and for always for your ongoing partnership with Growing Home. We are so honored to work with the city to create a more thriving, healthy, and equitable Westminster for all. Thank you. We are so honored to work with the city to create a more thriving, healthy, and equitable Westminster for all. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, that concludes all the public comment that we have for this item.
Councillor, are there any questions of staff after hearing the public comment? Okay. The next item before us, well, I will close the public hearing at 8:05 and we will move on. The next item before us is item A2. Is there a motion? Councillor Scully.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 26 on first reading, providing for a supplemental appropriation of funds to the 2021 budget of the Community Development Block Grant Fund.
Councillor Vols.
I second the motion.
Madam Mayor, excuse me, I'm sorry. We skipped over item 10A2 and moved directly into 10A3. If we could.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Catch that happened. Councillor Scully, would you redo that?
I will. I apologize, ma'am. I move to approve the allocation of the Community Development Block Grant Funds as set forth in the year and authorize to submit the 2021 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Councillor Vols.
I second that motion too.
There has been the motion in the correct order and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Mayor Seitz.
Yes.
Councillor Seymour.
Yes.
Councillor Scully.
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Vols.
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Item 10A2 passes 6-0.
Councillor Scully, would you like to continue?
I would very much like to do that. I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 26 on first reading, providing for a supplemental appropriation of funds to the 2021 budget of the Community Development Block Grant Fund.
Councillor Vols.
I second the motion.
There has been a motion and a second. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns? Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I have no issues with the way the allocation is. As these projects come before us, I'll be having a critical eye as far as especially the updates in streetscaping, because I hope that we utilize those funds for permanent updates rather than transitional ones. We've seen situations in the past where we've done projects and CDBG funds do not allow for maintenance past that point. So hopefully we'll utilize the opportunity to do permanent transitions and not something that later needs more upkeep from that standpoint too.
Thank you so much. Councillor Vols.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make a thank you comment. I want to thank our outstanding partners, Growing Home and Karen Fox Elwell and Jason McCullough of Brothers Redevelopment for their work on this. And I know they had during the public process and the public comments, they were instrumental in helping us have a good plan here. So I want to thank them for speaking to us tonight and their work on the plan overall. So thank you. And I plan to vote yes.
And I will just say, the entire time I've been on council, we have really promoted and pushed to make sure we have affordable and attainable housing in our community because it is so vital. And allowing people to age in home is an important tool for that. So do appreciate the way these dollars are allocated. All of council received an email just today about disability curb cut request in a portion of our town. So happy to see the streetscape improvements as well. And I apologize, Councilor Scully, I jumped ahead of you. I didn't see your light.
That's all right. I understand we're having technical problems. I just wanted to, I'm just going to echo what Mayor Seitz and Councilor Voles said. I don't think I could say any more that would add to the conversation, but thank you to Growing Home and to Brothers Redevelopment. Awesome presentation and truly excited to see this pass in our community.
Seeing no additional comments, this is a roll call vote.
Councilor Seymour,
Yes.
Councilor Scully,
Yes.
Councilor Smith,
Yes.
Councilor Voles,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott,
Yes.
and Mayor Seitz.
Yes.
Item 10A3 passes 6-0.
Before we move on to the next agenda item, there's been a request for a brief break. We will reconvene at, let's see here, 8:15. we'd like to start the meeting up again. All right. Thank you. We're starting back up here. The next item before us is to hold a public meeting on the city's application for the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program. It is now 8:17 p.m. At this time, we'll open the public meeting. Mr. Tripp, is there any presentation from staff on this item?
There is not, Madam Mayor.
All right.
That wasn't necessary. I apologize.
It just woke us all up. It's okay.
That wasn't fun at all. I'm sorry. We
Reminds
don't have
me
a
of the movie.
presentation this evening.
There we go. At this time, we will move on to comments from the public for this item, unless there are any questions from council. I would ask the city clerk to please summarize the number of participants this evening and introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this time, we haven't had any members of the public request to speak on this item in any of the methods available.
Okay. Council, last chance. Any questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just one quick question is the $28,515 grant revenue, is that just an upfront cost to purchase the system? And then is there any annual cost thereafter for software and or maintenance?
Acting Chief Hobart, please.
Mayor Pro Tem, councilors. To answer your question, Councilor Smith, there's no ongoing cost. It's a one-time cost. The $28,000 will be an upfront by the grant, and then we will supplement that with a few thousand more dollars out of our budget for the total purchase of the product this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
I believe Councillor Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, and thank you for being here tonight. And just briefly, it says in our packet, it would lead to a reduction in crime. Can you just touch on maybe just generally how that might happen and why that might lead to a reduction in crime? Because of course, the scenario we're in now, that's a really good thing.
Yes. This will allow us to gain more evidence, to gather more evidence from victims and crime scenes through the reflective ultraviolet imaging system. Say that twice. But allow us to do that and then place those suspects into custody, spread that net a little bit wider on the front end so we can identify those suspects, take them into custody so they're not out reoffending, thus reducing the crime.
Good. All right. Thank you for that answer. And I plan to vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hobart.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none. Okay, we will close the public hearing. Seeing no other, I'm sorry, Councillor Scully. Nope, no other comments or questions. It is 8:20. The next item before us is item 10B2. I believe that is Mayor Pro Tem DeMont.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to authorize the mayor to execute a written certificate in support of the city's application for the 2021 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program.
And Councillor Scully.
I second.
There's a motion and a second. This is a roll call vote. Or I'm sorry, are there any comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Councillor Scully.
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Bowles.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem DeMont.
Yes.
Mayor Sides.
Yes.
And Councillor Seymour.
Yes.
Item 10B2 passes 6-0.
The next item before us is Councilor's Bill number 7, 27. Is there a motion? Councilor Seymour?
Thank you. I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 27 on first reading, authorizing the city manager to execute an economic development assistance agreement with HD Alameda LLC for the redevelopment of 1257 West 120th Avenue in a form that is substantially the same form as presented.
Councilor. Okay. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns on this item? Mayor, or I'm sorry, that's not Mayor Pro Tem, that's me.
Mayor, I'd like to say just.
Is
a
it
word.
you? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it doesn't have the names
I
anymore.
apologize
There's
for
just
having
numbers.
an issue with that tonight. Yeah, we'll get that correct. Thank you for an opportunity. Just very briefly, this is an economic development assistance agreement. COVID, was very difficult for many businesses across America. CB Potts closed its facility on 120th in our city. We're fortunate through this agreement that it will be replaced with a new building that will house 3 new restaurants to Colorado. But the most important thing is that our assistance agreement this evening is on sales tax rebate that we wouldn't otherwise have. So I appreciate, the conversations we've had with you, Council, previous to this evening to provide some background for you. But I just wanted to let the public know that, we're very thoughtful with these economic development assistance agreements. You have a lot of great questions to make sure that they're worth the commitment of resources. In this case, we're really proud that we're able to get that property back into an effective use and long-term provide tax revenue to the city and 3 great new restaurants into our community.
Thank you. I believe the next is Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Just one quick question for staff is, this restaurant is moving from 1 into 3 restaurants, and I'm curious as to what kind of impact that will have on our water supply.
My understanding is the overall volume of use with these 3 is not going to exceed the CB Potts facility, but if Utility Director Kirschbaum has other information or Stephanie Trawler can provide any other information than that, that's my understanding of this redevelopment project.
Councilor Smith, does that answer
I
your
was just
question?
wondering, is that your final answer? Okay. All right.
That's my understanding.
All right. Thank you. I will be in favor of this. I know it's much needed for the area. I realize that there is an extensive amount of rebates and sales tax and that going forward into this. But I think it's needed as far as the revitalization of that location. So I will be in support of this, just keeping with that keen eye on our water supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Smith. Are there any other comments or questions from my colleagues? Okay. I will just like to add that I do think that this is a great EDA. We always want to be very cautious and careful when we're incentivizing redevelopment. But we've heard loud and clear from our residents that they would like to see us redevelop empty spaces, empty buildings within the city. And that's a priority rather than seeing them sit vacant. Additionally, this meets my own criteria of the rule, if not but for this assistance, and that the tax is new tax that will be generated that we are assisting with. So I will also be voting yes tonight. And I do appreciate Councilor Smith's question about the water resources. I know it's an important topic, and so we need to show that we're always mindful of it. So, seeing no other comments or questions, we are going to have a roll call vote.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem DeMott.
Yes.
Mayor Seitz.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
And Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Councilor's Bill number 27 passes on first reading 6-0.
The next item before us is Councilor's Bill number 28. It appears to be Mayor Pro Tem DeMott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to pass Councilor Bill number 28 on first reading, adding subsection E to section 1-11-3 of the Westminster Municipal Code concerning remote attendance of meetings.
Counselor Scully.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns on this item? Mayor Pro Tem DeMont.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take a second to thank my colleagues for good discussion that I think came up with a good remote policy that both allows some flexibility, but also some accountability to this body to allow remote meetings or remote participation in certain situations.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions, this is a roll call vote.
Counselor Bowles,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem DeMont,
Yes.
Mayor Sites,
Yes.
Counselor Seymour,
Yes.
Counselor Scully,
Yes.
and Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselors, Bill number 28 passes on first reading 6-0.
The next item before us is item 10E, resolution number 22. Is there a motion? Counselor Seymour, I believe.
Thank you. Move to adopt resolution number 22, authorizing the city manager to execute a quick claim deed to convey 35,356 square feet, 18,323 gross square feet of floodplain, and 17,033 gross square feet outside the floodplain of Big Dry Creek open space property in exchange for 95,147 gross square feet, 89,944 gross square feet of floodplain, and 5,203 gross square feet outside the floodplain from Boulder Creek 128 and Huron LLC.
That was a mouthful. Counselor Scully.
I second.
There has been a motion and a second. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns on this item? Counselor Bowles.
Well, I want to thank staff and my colleagues for the work on this. This is the first open space edition we've had in a long time. So I think this is important and I will be voting yes, but I want to thank staff and all of our partners for working together. And I know it took quite a bit of effort to piece this together. So thank you. I look forward to voting for this.
Thank you. Okay, this is a roll call vote.
Mayor Pro Tem DeMont,
Yes.
Mayor Sites,
Yes.
Counselor Seymour,
Yes.
Counselor Scully,
Yes.
Counselor Smith,
Yes.
and Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Resolution number 22 is adopted 6-0.
The next item before us is resolution number 23. Is there a motion? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 23, directing staff to engage with police department employees and the Fraternal Order of Police to address underlying concerns behind their recent collective bargaining inquiry to identify solutions.
And Counselor Smith.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. Do we have any comments, questions, or concerns? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Earlier tonight, we heard from members of the Fraternal Order of Police, our representative, and we also had some comments from City Manager Tripp, as well as Counselor Smith alluded to an email that I sent. When this was put forward on the agenda, Mr. Tripp, you asked if it hit the mark, and I did reply that for me, it kind of missed the mark. And I think that there seemed like there was a varying degree of what was the body was comfortable moving forward with at this point. I, for one, would like to see more teeth behind actually a motion that says that we're going to have collective bargaining be one of those potential identified solutions. I know you had asked last week about being open to potentially that not being the end road. I think that a large majority of the police department has spoken pretty clearly that they want that. So I will be supporting this resolution tonight, but I would put across to my colleagues if they would be open to potentially adding what I would consider more teeth to this in efforts to try to line up our police department in a way that addresses their concerns and lines them up with our fire department.
City Manager Tripp.
I would accept that.
Okay, Counselor Scully.
I also will support that.
Counselor Smith.
I would support that.
Counselor Seymour.
I support as well.
Me as well.
All right. And the mayor as well. Are there any other comments or questions?
I would just thank both Mr. Tripp and the body for supporting that desire. I again thank the body of police officers who showed up tonight to make their voices heard, and I think that this is an important step forward to showing the men and women of the police department that this body is behind them, as well as the city management is.
Mayor, if I could, I'd just like to point out that we have in the attachment, just so that folks in the audience and the folks listening understand, if they look at the attached staff report on here, it pretty clearly points out that collective bargaining conversation would be part of this. It was not in the resolution, is what I think Mayor Pro Tem is referring to, and he'd like to add that, which is the direction I received from the full council, is that we would be open to collective bargaining as a part of the overall conversation. So just so you don't, no one thinks there is any really disagreement here in getting the resolution to match what we talked about last week and what was in the communication that I provided to council. I do think the city attorney would probably like a little direction as to how to execute this concept.
City Attorney Frankel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I would just ask the modification to the resolution. Is it to call out that those discussions are open to collective bargaining as part of the conversation? Or are there more specific references that council would like to build into the resolution?
For me,
Mayor Pro Tem?
well, I was the one who made the thing, so go ahead.
No, I just was, that Mayor Pro Tem?
So like I said, my desire when I first brought this up a couple weeks ago, as far as putting something on the agenda that had a motion behind it, was to work towards the request, which the request was collective bargaining. Originally, the FOP's request was a charter amendment. There was a lot of different information given to us that potentially the better solution would be a collective bargaining ordinance that would put them in line with the fire department. So understanding that maybe not, I don't know where everybody else is. For me, I would be open to an ordinance that matched up with the fire department collective bargaining in a way that addresses the concerns of the police department, understanding they're a different department inside the city, so they may have some different concerns, that allows them to have a collective bargaining agreement that's in some way lines up with the fire department but addresses their concerns. So how you put that in a motion, I leave that to the attorney. That's not my expertise, but that would be my desire.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Smith?
Thank you. I would second Mayor Pro Tem's request in having have it specifically outline a work toward a collective bargaining agreement. In that, if we can't meet any of these one of three items, that we work towards progressing towards that CBA. So something that formalizes that we're moving towards that progression of an agreement.
I believe what I heard earlier, just moments ago, was continue conversations and including including collective bargaining as one potential solution. What I'm hearing from, I believe, Mayor Pro Tem is he wants to be even more specific, that one of those potential solutions is not just collective bargaining, but perhaps an ordinance modeled on our firefighters. So you're wanting two potential, because I think the goal, I'm fine with that, by the way, that I'm fine with us discussing that, but I think the goal was to have enough conversations so we are not deciding the end result right now, but we're really making sure we're addressing the underlying concerns appropriately and not jumping to solution, like kind of that idea of upstream solutions. So I'm a little nervous about being too prescriptive at this point, but just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, to kind of give my thoughts on that because I like what you're saying and I think it makes sense what you're saying. And I don't like even to the point of, I had a request about maybe hearing from the FOP, and I know that was discussed, maybe that needs to go through the city manager, and the difference between the body and what's under our SID and what's not. And I totally 100% agree with that. And my desire for that wasn't to get into the actual agreement. I don't think that this body belongs in that portion. I guess my desire is to let the police department know, and those who have asked for this, that I'm supportive of them doing that. If for some reason in those negotiations, City Manager Tripp finds a magic solution and they say, hey, you know what, actually you solved all our problems, we don't want that, I'm open to that. But since they're asking, saying this, we did hear from a speaker tonight saying an alternate view, but the numbers that we were shown from the vote that the police department and the Fraternal Order of Police had was a large amount of our police department, an overwhelming large amount of the police department. So for me, I'd like to show that this body is, or at least my desire would be to say, we're behind this. And we're going to let you talk with City Manager Tripp and work through what that looks like, and come back to us with, here's what that looks like. But open to, if that changes in those discussions, that we're not locked into that solution. Does that make sense?
Would it be enough? And because I feel like I thought we came to an agreement last week, and we obviously in the language of the resolution didn't get what you were hoping for. So I don't want to run into that mistake again. So I'm not being willfully obtuse or difficult here. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you. Would it meet your goals if the language was similar to what it had now, but then specifically called out, including the option of collective bargaining?
I could, that would meet my, it's not exact, but that would work.
Well, I think there are smarter people than me that can probably wordsmith it a little bit better, but sure. What I hear you saying is you want that to be one of the tools in the quiver to address this, or the toolbox. I don't know why I did mix metaphors there. So
that would be acceptable.
It appears that Mr. Frankel may not agree. Let's let our city attorney jump in here.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. No, my raising my hand is not to indicate any disagreement. I'm just going to propose some language and see if this captures the intent of council. Currently, the resolution in the second paragraph states staff is empowered to identify solutions, and this resolution is not intended to limit discussion of potential ways to ensure that concerns of our employees are satisfactorily addressed. I propose adding the following to that, paragraph number 2. These discussions may include the option of collective bargaining. Would that satisfy the desire of council to make a more specific reference to add these discussions may include the option of collective bargaining to paragraph number 2?
That would be acceptable to me.
Councillor Smith?
Yes, I would accept that.
I apologize. I believe that is Mayor Pro Tem's light that is also still on. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and poll council because this is an amendment. So what I'll need to do is have you make an amendment, and then the second we'll have to agree to the amendment. So before we do that, I'd like to just poll council to make sure we hit the mark for everyone. Is that legal and appropriate?
Agree, yes. And if it leads to amendment of the motion and the second is agreeable to that amendment, then I would poll the resolution as amended.
So this is just part of the conversation, folks, not a vote. Does anyone have any concerns with the proposal that has been put forward? If you have any concerns, okay. Councillor Voles.
I just want to confirm that we're focused on the dialogue, the discussions first. I don't want to see us put the cart before the horse and already assume. I think Mayor Pro Tem, you mentioned we don't want to say right off that we're going directly to collective bargaining, because there may be solutions and there may be some ways to work some things out prior to that. So I want to be sure, I guess, confirm that the language does say that we will have these full discussions and work on these issues as best we can before that. And that's where we are. I mean, I think I can support that if that's the I just want to confirm that's the intent.
As the drafter of the resolution before you, I was attempting to capture council's direction from last Monday.
Right.
And yes, that as drafted right now, it's intended to start the conversation and encourage collaborative identification of problems and identifying solutions. So adding the language that's proposed, which is these discussions may include the option of collective bargaining, I think does keep your options open.
Okay, thank you for that. I support this. Okay, thank you.
And I will just add on to that real quick before we ask for the amended motion. Being the one member of council who was on council during our conversations on collective bargaining from the beginning to when we, as council, passed the ordinance, it has been incredibly successful. But I think the secret to that was robust, iterative, collaborative communication. And really that spirit, that investment in communication and mutual understanding led to interest-based bargaining that has served the city, our residents, the department, and the organization as a whole very well. And so I, again, wouldn't want to abbreviate or presuppose a solution. I think those conversations are critical and valuable. And it appears, Attorney Frankel, is that you?
No, it's me.
I'm sorry.
I should have said earlier because I've said it before, so I want to reiterate. I do support collective bargaining. So I think I've said that, but I want to make that clear. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more comments or questions, I would ask Mayor Pro Tem, are you willing to amend your motion?
Yes. Would it be better to read the whole motion with the addition?
Or could he just say as described by the city attorney?
I think you could just say as described by the city attorney.
Fantastic. As described by the city attorney, I would like to amend my motion.
Councilor Smith, do you agree to this amendment?
I second.
All right. We will now have a roll call vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mayor Sites, excuse me.
Sorry.
Looking at
Yes.
Councilor DeMott's name and reading yours, apologies.
Not a problem.
Mayor Sites.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Councilor Volz.
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem DeMott.
Yes.
Resolution number 23, as amended, is adopted 6-0.
The next item before us is item 10G. This is an amendment for the 2021 asphalt pavement crack seal project. Is there a motion? Councilor Seymour.
Thought the Mayor Pro Tem was going to get this one. I move to authorize city manager execute the first amendment of the 2021 asphalt pavement crack seal project with Coatings, Inc. in the amount of $279,861, which will keep the current unit pricing and extend the same of the contract from December 2021 to May 2022. A contingency has been added in the amount of $25,139 for a total authorized expenditure of $305,000. The amendment increases the total authorized expenditure for this contractor from $554,125 to $859,125.
And it appears Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns on this item? Councilor Seymour. All right. Seeing no comments or concerns, we will do a roll call vote.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Councilor Volz.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem DeMott.
Yes.
And Mayor Sites.
Yes.
Item 10G passes 6-0.
Next item before us is item 10H. Is there a motion? Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move, based on the recommendations of the city manager, to determine that the public interest is best served by authorizing the city manager to execute a negotiated contract with CDM Smith, Inc. in the amount of $1,326,423 for engineering design services for the Water 2025 98th Avenue potable water pipeline and supporting utilities project, and also by authorizing a contingency in the amount of $132,642 for an expenditure of $1,459,065. The amendment increases the total authorized expenditure with this contractor from $15,559,856 to $17,018,921.
Counselor Bowles?
I second the motion.
I may have misheard, but I think there was two numbers transposed. Did anyone else hear that? I believe 132,000 was read as 123,000. Did anyone else hear that? Okay. All right. I'm making things up now. My apologies. There has been a motion and a second. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns on this item? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I alluded to earlier, I'm in an uncomfortable position with our plan for water 2025, so it does not make sense for me to support this motion, so I'll be voting no on it.
Councilor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important that we need to continue to take care of our operations, and timing of that is just as important as I had mentioned in previous sessions. I also was one that alluded to maybe conducting an audit. I think it would bode for some confidence in us being in the right direction, whether or not that is the case. Last council meeting, I had approved moving forward with finishing a design. I think that is I think that's important in allowing final constructability and seeing final costs of what that would take to construct a water treatment plant. But considering the information from Mr. Tripp on inflation costs and increasing costs just all the way around, and not having a clear understanding of where our water rates lie for the next month or two, I can't move forward with moving this vote for an approval. So I will be voting no tonight. I look forward to finding the ways that we can pay for this, because I do believe in operations, but I think there's something to be said in making sure that it's the right timing. So I will be voting no.
Councilor Scully.
Yeah, I actually have a question. How does this increase, without a rate increase at this point, how are we increasing this amount now? Is this something that's been in our budget previously, so it's unrelated to the rate increase? Is it part of that conversation?
Would like to bring up Public Works Director. Public Works Director, yes, it is in our budget, but I'd like to have Max explain how this actually ties to what we reported previously when we asked for approval of the design contract for the plant.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. The funds for this work are already in the budget, very similar, if not exactly the same as the item that you considered 2 weeks ago that authorized us to proceed with the design step of the plant itself. This project is also related to one that you approved, the design for the pipeline for the raw water supply lines to and from between the new plant location and our high service pump station. So that the work for the raw water lines is already underway in design. This is the companion that addresses the potable water or the finished water lines that similarly will connect the new Water 2025 site to our high service pump station on Pierce. So those are the three pieces of eventual construction that are depicted on the timeline that we've shown you graphically numerous times, and they reflect when we estimate total costs of construction to come later. This is the design work that makes sure that all three pieces would be ready for eventual construction consideration. Does that answer the question?
It absolutely does. I have another question though. The increase. So here we see an increase, and we've talked about weighting increases the cost because the materials are going up.
Yeah.
Is this a result of that?
No. This is merely identified as an increase because it's another component of work for the same consultant, in this case, CDM Smith. So this does not reflect, again, it's design work. It does not reflect anything related to cost of materials or inflation in the construction business. This is to do the design work, to address even things like easements for how does that pipe get from point A to point B. All of that has to be worked out in the design so that when we get to a later construction stage, we have an executable project. It's merely identified as an amendment because the consultant we've chosen competitively in this case, we already have business with. But this would be a separate contract, but it's recognized as an amendment because we already have business with them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Kirschbaum. I'll be voting in support of this tonight.
Thank you. Councilor Bowl, or Councilor Seymour, I apologize.
Hey, Madam Mayor, no questions for Mr. Kirschbaum from me. I just had a comment on this too, and similar to what I mentioned on moving forward with Water 2025 is that it's an incremental process and that this will not be fully online until 2040. And so I think that we have to lay the groundwork for this process. I know it's an expensive process. It doesn't fully drive all of our water rates, so I'm still looking for opportunities from that standpoint. But if we think about not just particulate issues that we have to have concern with in our watershed after a fire, is that also having to deal with some of the chemicals that they drop on those fires to be able to treat those in the future too. So having learned more about that recently, I do have some concerns from that. So I will be supporting this action tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Seymour. Councilor Smith.
Thank you for allowing me to ask one more question. We may have discussed this at one point, but please refresh my memory as why these are broken out into components and not programmatic. We knew that this was coming forward as far as the components that would need for Water 2025, and I'm curious as to why these pieces are pieced out in different contracts.
The three components of work are actually very separate elements of work. The plant itself is different from pipeline projects, and it is at least feasible, conceivable that we would not select the same consultant to do the design work who has expertise in building a plant as you might select a consultant who has expertise specifically in pipelines. So as a result, we broke these out into three different distinct pieces, and it's also good for the consultant community and for competition that we are getting, as we are in this case, best value by the best contractor for each of those three pieces.
Okay. And what allowed us to think of it in that way? Because there's different ways to deliver a product. There's design build, design bid build, and CMGC. I'm curious as to what we thought as far as the best product on moving forward in that way.
Yeah, and certainly we are, as we have identified to you before, we are looking at the full range of what is called CMAR, Construction Manager at Risk, project delivery methods that will be coming later as foreseen in the graphic timeline that we've shared with you. Later this summer, if we remain on track with all elements of this project, we will be coming to you to seek the opportunity to negotiate with a CMAR contractor to partner into this process from the very early stages and not after it's too late. So that will happen. It's a little different with pipeline projects are a little bit more clear. There are fewer alternatives and options once you select a routing and consider the easements for those pipelines.
Thank you.
Right. Are there any other questions or comments on this? I will also be voting in support for many of the same reasons that I voted last time. Particularly, it feels relevant and timely, understanding that we do see cost escalation. So while we have a contract in front of us, budgeted amount of money that it matches that contract, and we have already bonded for this money. This is planned. We have it in hand. I would not want to delay and, similar to 2 weeks ago, have costs escalate on us. So again, to Councillor Seymour's point, we know we have to do it eventually. We might as well get the engineering work done now while we have both the money and know the cost. So I will be voting yes on this tonight. Seeing no other comments or questions, I am going to call the roll call vote.
Councillor Scully,
Yes.
Councillor Smith,
No.
Councillor Bowles,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem DeMott,
No.
Mayor Seitz,
Yes.
and Councillor Seymour.
Yes.
Item 10H passes on a vote of 4 yes and 2 no.
All right. The next item before us is to hold a final regularly scheduled discussion about the city's response to COVID-19 and possible next steps. Director Kirschbaum.
Good evening again. This evening, as Mayor Seitz just said, as we had discussed with you previously, this would be the final presentation of case data related reporting. And part of that is, as we look at these two slides, the first one being the Adams County hospitalization metric that drives the determination of level clear. We see that the hospitalization rate is still less than 0.5 with a ceiling, as you see on the red line, of 2.0, which describes the rate per 100,000, the case rate per 100,000 of hospitalizations. So this one, and if you go to the next slide, please, you see the Jefferson County numbers similarly at that at low level. Interestingly, as you look at state data, no matter what is going on with case rates, which, by the way, are going up, the hospitalization rate seems to be holding fairly steady statewide at around 300. It's been that way for quite a while. On the case data front, also on CDPHE's website, statewide, the current case rate is at 117 positives over a 14-day period per 100,000 people. The Adams County and the Jefferson County numbers are both slightly better than that number, but that is the overall state number. I did want to point out also one quick note on vaccination and one quick note on testing. Thanks again to our Parks, Rec, and Libraries team working with our fire department, specifically Deputy Chief Burke. There will be what is called in CDPHE's terms an equity vaccination clinic, which is a mobile clinic that will be held this Saturday, July 31st at the Swim and Fit Center in historic Westminster. And those equity vaccination clinics are an attempt to target those who might be medically underserved population. There would be a subsequent similar mobile clinic at the approximate correct interval following this first vaccination. So if it's a 21-day or a 14-day interval, there would be a follow-up so those same people could return for their second vaccination. Those costs are being borne by the state. PRNL is the host providing facility for them, but costs are being borne by the state. In terms of testing, as you know, there continues to be a testing site at Front Range Community College. Our current agreement is that that would run through the end of July. However, we're nearing the end of July. CDBG has asked whether the parties involved, namely the city as well as Front Range Community College, whether it would be possible to continue that testing service to the end of August through Labor Day. And their reason for asking that is that the thought might be that once Waterworld closes for the season around Labor Day, that perhaps Waterworld could once again become a location for a testing site. So the location that we have in our city at Front Range Community College would allow that bridge to continue until we get to Labor Day, and then they can make a best assessment on whether to proceed back to Waterworld or not. The parties are agreeable to that, so they will, that testing site will continue through the month of August. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirschbaum. I also just want to say thank you for being a steady, thoughtful, and informative voice for us as we've had these briefings throughout the entire time of COVID. It hasn't just helped council make strong and informed policy decisions, but I think it helped to reassure residents as to what the situation is. So very much appreciate that. And I guess I'm reading this correctly. This is your final one, is that?
Yes, I'll just say we've benefited from a lot of very smart and a lot of very dedicated people carrying forward these programs, especially vaccination and testing. That took a lot of effort by folks who that is not their primary job, but they made it their mission to do it right.
Well, I just appreciate your leadership and the service that you and your team provided, and just wanted to say thank you. And as Mayor Pro Tem, and I think all of us say, public health and safety is a priority, and this is one way you helped promote it. One of many ways you helped promote it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would echo the mayor's comments. Thank you for your work on this, Max. One quick question I had follow up. We've asked, I think Councilor Smith asked this before. Is the PD and the fire department, do they continue to have to be tested? Well, and actually, I guess I don't know if the fire department's doing a similar program, but does that continue, and where do you anticipate that will cut off, or are we going to just kind of watch it?
Yeah, we terminated that testing several weeks ago on a recurring basis, but those services continue to be available on an as needed basis, not only for those two departments, but for all city employees. But it was discontinued as, I forget the exact date, I'd have to check my notes, but it was discontinued as a routine, recurring thing for both departments.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Seymour.
Hey, Madam Mayor, I also want to thank you for your diligence in this process and all the staff that assisted you in that. Greatly appreciated that. I know early on I had a lot of numbers and I threw those around, and you took those and ran with them. But I too, 3 happy words, final, regularly scheduled. So thank you.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to echo my colleagues. Mr. Kirschbaum, thank you so much for your reports every week. They not only helped us make decisions, but as Mayor said, it's helpful for our residents to hear. And as you mentioned, people that are not in those professions and every day have stepped into those positions last year, and including into this year was extremely hard. And I recognize that. And I wanted to thank you for all of your reports and due diligence.
Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm going to jump on the bandwagon. Director Kirschbaum, I want to thank you for taking on these additional duties. This is above and beyond what you normally would do. And you showed consistent, steady, level-headed leadership in your approach to this. I appreciate it. It allowed this council, in my opinion, to have the best possible decisions we could based on the facts. And like Councilor Seymour said, we all had a lot of questions with a lot of numbers, and you were able to help us see through those and understand those. So I want to thank you for your dedicated efforts and your whole team. So if you'll pass that along to the team, it allowed us to be a leader here in Westminster and do a lot of really good work. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
I'll make it a point tomorrow to pass on your thanks to all of them. I
Thank you.
know they're not all listening this evening. Some of them are, I'm certain, but I'll make sure that they all hear your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there additional discussion points on COVID-19 tonight, or is that it? With that ends our regularly scheduled city council meeting. We will reconvene here briefly for the post-meeting briefing, but I'd like to give my colleagues a break before that. So thank you. It is 9:07 and the city council meeting is adjourned. I did. Clerk Parker, are we still muted?
I don't believe you are.
Okay, then we will go ahead and get started. It is 9:19 and we are reconvening for the post-meeting briefing. There are two presentations on the agenda for tonight. The first of which is the presentation on the 2021 Colorado State Legislative Session. City Manager Tripp. I believe you are muted, Mr. Lindsay.
Awesome. Sorry, I didn't hear Mr. Tripp say anything. Good evening, City Council. We're here this evening to review the 2021 state legislative session with you. I want to begin by thanking a huge staff team that works behind the scenes throughout the legislative session to make sure we keep you informed and keep our state delegation informed. Both Teresa Boko, our lead on legislative work, and John Praisner, who's helped out this year, have also done a really terrific job this year. And you're not going to see them this evening because they're taking some well-deserved time with their families. We also want to thank you all, City Council, because we're aware that we send you a lot of information on legislation. We a lot of times ask for quick responses on those, and you're always generous with your time and get back to us quickly. So we thank you. I would like to note that there's a fairly extensive report that's attached to the agenda memo tonight that the team has prepared for you all. So I hope that has answered a lot of questions before we even start. And with that, actually, I'm just going to jump right in and let me introduce the city's state lobbyists, Amy Atwood and Becky Long, who are going to provide a brief presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chris. Can everyone hear me? Okay, Amy Atwood, contract lobbyist. Together, Becky Long and I thank you for the opportunity to represent the City of Westminster before the General Assembly over the past year and during the 2021 legislative session. This was a unique session with COVID restrictions, remote testimony, and unprecedented amounts of one-time money to spend. Overall, 330 House bills and 293 Senate bills were introduced and reviewed by our team, including city staff as well, as Chris said. Of the 623 bills, 101 were actively monitored for impacts to the city. City Council took formal positions on 8 bills, and we were successful with those 8 bills. They all went in the direction of the council position. You have received our final report, as Chris said, which contains much more detail than we can possibly get through tonight. The Westminster Legislative Policy Statement and policy principles guide the work that we do with legislators. Public safety was again a prominent issue at the Capitol, as Councilor Seymour noted earlier this evening. We saw more reform of the criminal justice system, including expanding the police accountability law that passed in 2020, speedier hearings for criminal defendants, restrictions on the use of chemical restraints, and eliminating certain fines juveniles are required to pay. Also, additional restrictions on how guns are stored and sold, new requirements for gun owners whose firearms are lost or stolen, and new authority for local jurisdictions to enact measures that are more restrictive than the statewide laws. Another policy area of prominence was affordable housing, which falls underneath your economic development policy principle. We saw the passage of House Bill 1117, local government authority to promote affordable housing units, in which the city supported. This bill solidifies the city's ability to advance affordable workforce housing through inclusionary zoning and supports local control. This bill was also known as the Telluride Bill, and it was brought forward by CML. Also, House Bill 1327, American Rescue Plan Act money to invest affordable housing, kind of a clunky title, it passed. This was one of 3 bills that contained ARPA money. $550 million will be used for affordable housing. This bill set up an interim committee to help direct the spending of the $550 million. and appointments to that committee were made public last week. Mayor Adam Paul from Lakewood is the municipal representative. Members span the continuum of affordable housing in Colorado. Interim committees will be meeting this year, unlike last year. Some have begun to meet and others are expected to begin in August. We monitor these committees as each brings forth legislation that could impact the city. Becky's now going to take over and talk transportation, state budget, and all that ARPA money.
Hi, thanks so much, and thanks, Amy. It's nice to see you all. I'm Becky Long. I'm with Siegel Public Affairs, and we really do enjoy working with staff and representing you all at the building, and appreciate all the thoughtful work that's gone into your policy decisions on the front end, which makes our work really much easier when it comes to deciding whether or not we need to bring a bill forward and try to figure out what to do with it. So just wanted to thank you all for the hard work you do before there's even bills on the table to help guide our work. As Amy mentioned, there's a lot of ARPA money. She touched on the affordable housing dollars. The legislators approved 3 bills in late session. The 1329, which has $400 million for affordable housing, 137, Senate Bill 137, which has $450 million for behavioral health, and a higher education bill, which will also meet sort of within the Department of Higher Education process. Those bills are one part sort of guide for how the states can move forward on this federal dollars, and one part. Sorry, not sure how I muted myself. For future additional dollars that we may see come in from the federal government. The legislature, through the executive committee, which is made up of leadership from both parties, has gone ahead and formed a handful of task forces which are beginning to meet. Those will begin to meet in early August to scope their mission. Amy mentioned that Adam Paul will be on the Affordable Housing Committee. The Behavioral Health Committee has also been named, and there is a representative from the CML staff who will sit on that committee. So we look forward to seeing what issues come out of those, and we'll be following that process closely along with your interim committee. In all, the state budget this year was something of a pleasant surprise. We ended last session with pretty serious cuts and harsh decisions that were made in June and May of 2020, as we anticipated pretty intense economic downturns. And while we certainly saw an unpredictable economy last year, we had more money coming in than we actually anticipated. And so we were able to restore a number of the cuts that were made in mid-2020. In all, we had about an $800 million surplus in the budget, and the legislature worked to allocate those dollars across a number of priorities. That included front-loading some of the transportation funding package, which I'll talk more about in a moment, with several $100 million, investing in wildfire, preparedness work, broadband infrastructure, childcare support, and the Office of Just Transition, along with some other workforce efforts. Those dollars have been allocated to see what other dollars come in future months, and we'll be watching that budget closely. There were a number of large issues that moved this year. As Amy said, we engaged in a whole bunch of them. There's a lot of detail in the report, but we'd be happy to answer questions on any of them. We did want to highlight the transportation package, given the size of it. In all told, that package is about $5 billion. Both with some of the state stimulus dollars, as I mentioned, some ongoing state general funds, the ability to sort of backfill should there be federal dollars that we could use instead, and the creation of new fees for new dollars that will come in to support some of those efforts. We'll create a number of new enterprises, including the Multimodal Options Fund enterprise, as well as a ozone non-attainment enterprise. Between those funds and the HUTF dollars that will be increased, I think we anticipate the city will see a pretty significant chunk of new money, though we're still waiting to get better projections on what that might be. But certainly millions even in the first years, and more growing over time. The numbers right now are kind of early, but we're watching them closely to see what those dollars might look like. So with that, I might pause, and we'll see if folks have any questions either on anything we covered tonight or anything in the report. As Amy mentioned, we'll be watching the interim process and tracking that, pinging staff as we see things that come up, and getting ready for 2021.
And along that, Becky, getting ready for 2022, actually.
Yeah, I'll be ready for 21 by the end of it.
are the congressional redistricting and legislative redistricting. Those two commissions have begun to meet. The preliminary maps are out, and staff and commission members have been very clear to say that the maps will be changing with community input. They are traveling around the state now to get that community input. So we will also keep tabs on those. The final maps are to be out, I believe, in November.
That's right. There's been a lot of consternation about the initial map. Certainly, I think we read a lot about the congressional maps, but at the state legislative process, about a quarter of the House is in the same districts as each other. So a lot of incumbents would have to decide, number of people would not be in the legislature anymore. On the Senate side, Senator Zenzinger and Senator Winter are currently drawn into the same district. We do anticipate a number of changes to both those maps, but we could see a number of changes to our maps in particular for the city.
And redistricting has to be completed by December 31st per the state constitution. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Becky, for that very thorough report and for your written report as well. It is incredibly informative. But I'm going to ask my colleagues here on council, do any of you have questions for the Atwood Long team? Councilors, I'm sorry, Councilor Seymour. I'm sorry, Councilor Bowles. There's no names now, so.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Good evening, and thanks for being here, and thank you for the report. On the redistricting, are we mostly, so I have to admit, I'm really out of the loop with this, but is there a thought that we want to be mostly in one legislator's district? And are we? How are we right now as far as right now we're all in, a lot of it is in District 35 and a little bit in 29. Are we divided amongst currently a lot of different districts? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I think it depends on perspective. Currently, we have 3 senators and 2 House members who rep us, so a total delegation of 5 members. That's probably more than some cities of our size who might all be in one district. And so in some ways, we might have more influence because more people may care about what the city thinks and cares about on different issues. And at the same time, sometimes a member who only has a little corner of one city or another may not be as invested as if they have majority of another community. So I think it often depends on who fills those seats. I think right now, in terms of our work, we're just sort of trying to see where that process lands and what will happen. I think that, we, like everyone else, have never been through this independent redistricting process before. It's brand new. I think we'll all learn a lot about the process and see what comes out. The goal of that effort and the directive in the constitutional language is around trying to keep communities together and thinking about how you do that in representation. But I think there's arguments to be made that you can keep a community unified and still have multiple representatives depending on the community and how the lines are drawn and what the underlying neighborhoods perhaps look like in terms of their representation.
And looking at incumbents, the legislative staff that put together this first set of maps were not to look at where the incumbents were. And that is something different than we saw a decade ago. So that's why we're seeing so many that are being put together, because that community of interest was really top of the list. And we are getting another congressional district, Congressional District 8, and that one right now looks to be Broomfield.
But, right. Thank you for the answers. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to Amy and Becky for all your work. I know it's a long session and you always do such a professional job and reaching out to us and communicating. I really appreciate it. And I want to also state that I appreciate your comments on the redistricting. I have been following it very closely. I have even attended a few meetings on it. It is very much a hot topic. The night I went to it, it went till 11 o'clock that night, and several people had many comments. So thank you for your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Scully. Are there any other comments or concerns? Okay. Seeing none, I do think that this does spark a little bit of a question. I believe what they're going to be looking at now are communities with common interests. And do we as a body really want to think about how we want to be represented? Westminster does have some unique challenges. We have 3 different school districts. Right? We're in 2 different counties. And so do we feel we've been well served having state reps, that are in different counties, kind of having that dividing line, having state senators similarly with the dividing line, or do we not? But we might have a pretty critical voice in those redistricting conversations. So it may be something we want to think about and discuss as a body if we want to weigh in on. And I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that, or if Assistant City Manager Lindsay has thoughts.
So certainly up to council whether or not you would like to weigh in and submit a letter to the redistricting commission. I'm going to echo something that Becky said that I think fits me or my perspective, and that's that I think with the state legislature having more folks represent us is better. Even if they have a sliver, it gives us an in a lot of times when we're counting votes and looking for friends in certain areas. I think on the federal level, certainly having one representative that we communicate with is probably key. But it's, again, for me and my perspective, it's a little bit different for state and federal. So with that, though, Mayor, certainly we're open to any feedback from council. And if council would like to draft a letter or share some feedback to the commission, we're more than happy to help with that.
I think just planting a seed tonight for maybe future conversations. So, Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have only heard one other city actually speak out, and it was the mayor of the city and one of the city council members, and they spoke on their own behalf, not on behalf of the city. I will tell you, in listening to these conversations, the people that have stood up and spoke, and they're mostly residents, business owners, representatives of nonprofits, but very few electeds have stood up and spoke. And part of that is I've understood that that's kind of been the request, is that the electeds not make a lot of input on this and allow the general public to be more the voice. I think they've done a really good job expressing their wants and their needs, and what they see as a way to represent our community. I haven't heard anything that I've just gone, oh my gosh, that's so off the wall. It all seems very aligned, and it is not actually what the commission has presented. So there's been a lot of discrepancy against the commission, in my opinion, but the general public has been very united in what they've wanted. And I think the commission is very open to listening to that. So that's been my personal experience. I don't know if other people have had different experiences.
I was asked to sign a letter. I think a lot of other people have, as far as mayors, and couldn't do it without that much. So I think there might be a variety of ways people have seen it. So definitely look forward to kind of how it plays out, because it will have an impact on. I appreciate you attending those meetings and reporting back what you've heard. Without seeing any other comments or questions, I think you two are free to leave us. Thank you so much for the report.
Thanks for having us. That was
the next item is presentation of federal lobbyist services. I'm assuming Mr. Lindsay, you are also in charge of this item.
Yes, ma'am. And if I could get Mike to camera there we go. Excellent. So thank you, City Council, for allowing us to talk to you this evening about the city's exciting federal lobbyist services. So thanks to your guidance at the budget retreat we had earlier this year, City Council put out an RFP. We've evaluated firms, and we recently contracted with Squire Patton Boggs to acquire federal lobbyist services for the city. We've established several goals in the short term around outreach and education to members of Congress on issues that are important to the city. In addition to monitoring and identifying federal funding opportunities with a focus on water and sewer infrastructure, transportation projects, and specific projects like 100th and Semmes, Federal Parkway, and the Lowell Boulevard water main replacement project. So with that, let me introduce Mike Dino, principal of Squire Patton Boggs.
Hey, thanks, Chris, and good evening, City Council. It is a privilege to be able to work as your federal advocate, and I appreciate the opportunity. My firm appreciates the opportunity. Let me share a little bit about us. Our firm's been in Denver since the late 1980s and in Washington, D.C. since the early 1960s. We were originally Patton Boggs and merged with a firm out of Cleveland called Squire Sanders in 2014 to become Squire Patton Boggs. We are a law firm as well as a lobbying firm. I'm not an attorney. I've been a public policy advisor my almost 24 years with the firm in Denver. And we have about 44 offices around the country. I work closely, certainly, with a lot of professionals in our Denver office that'll be a part of our team, as well as in our Washington, D.C. office. I'm a Denver native. I've lived in the Sloan's Lake area all my life. Grew up hanging out at the Westminster Mall, drinking a lot of Orange Julius. And my son spends a lot of money at your PGA Superstore. He's a young junior golfer going to college next year or next fall. So Westminster is certainly a very familiar place to me. I have relatives that live up there. I have relatives who work for the city of Westminster and have all their life. So it is truly a privilege, and I really appreciate this opportunity for me and our firm to be a part of working with the city of Westminster. As Chris pointed out, your agenda is an aggressive one. Certainly, it's a good time to be looking for money. And one of the key areas, obviously, is on transportation. Early on, the delegation, particularly Congressman Perlmutter, was very helpful in getting the federal Parkway project into the transportation authorization for a little over $4.1 million. It's an authorization bill that's in the House. It's only passed committee, needs to pass the full House, and needs to get over to the Senate and pass there and ultimately on to the president for signatures. So we got some time to work on that one, and we'll continue to work closely with the delegation, complement the relationships that you have with the delegation, and emphasize with them why this is important to continue to move it forward. Particularly right now, we're focused on our senators. Over in the Senate, they do not have what we call earmarks or community-funded projects. The Senate hasn't done that in the transportation authorization bill. So our effort is to advocate for our senators to support not only the federal project, but a lot of Colorado projects. Our delegation, particularly your congressman, has taken advantage of putting projects into the bill for the first time in 10 years. We haven't had this opportunity to actually put specific projects into federal legislation. Another important part of federal legislation that we're focusing on is the Lowell Boulevard water main replacement. We have a $2 million request that Senator Bennett has submitted into the Senate appropriations. They have not yet started hearing on the Senate appropriations. Appropriations is the annual budgeting and funding cycle of Congress. It runs, I think you know, the federal fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. And so we're nearing the end of fiscal year 2021 for the federal government on September 30th. They're not going to get their appropriations done on a timely fashion like you do at the city of Westminster or they do at the state of Colorado. And so we'll see a continuing resolution. And as we get toward the end of September, we'll probably see some grumbling about a federal shutdown. So be prepared for some of that. But that's one of the projects we'll follow through the Senate. And we hope that it gets its way all the way through the Senate and is approved at the House side too. and ultimately signed by the president. I think you do appreciate how important the federal government is on certain things. Just tonight, listening to CDBG, I think some of you have worked closely with Colorado Municipal League and National League of Cities. You understand how important CDBG is, and it is lobbied for every year. There's always somebody who wants to cut it. But I think in Colorado, and certainly in Westminster and the Denver metro area, CDBG is an important funding tool. It's usually leveraged 10 to 1, sometimes 20 to 1. Some people sometimes say 100 to 1 in terms of dollars. So we make good use of that, and it is an important thing on an annual basis that we continue to advocate for. And then the Justice Byrne grant that you also approved and had a public hearing on, that is I'm glad to see you're taking advantage of that. A lot of localities take advantage of that grant. And there are other grants that I'm sure you take advantage of, and I'm working with Chris and your staff relative to those issues. So I don't want to belabor too many things. One last thing is that we're all watching to see if there's going to be an infrastructure bill. I thought we'd see something in writing today, but they're held up on a few things. They're arguing over the amount of transit funding that should be in the bill. Some people feel transit's gotten too much, it's gotten enough money so far and doesn't need much more. There's some issues about water and water resources, mostly focused on lead pipe replacement. And so there's some debate about what that number should be. And I hope they get it worked out. And I hope we see something in writing this week. Infrastructure bill's been talked about a lot. John Hickenlooper's one of the 22 senators on the bipartisan committee that's put together the framework. And I'm anxious, as well as others, to actually see something in writing that we can support. So with that, Chris and council, I'm glad to take questions or any other comments that are pertaining to the federal matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dino, and thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Members of council, do we have any questions? Okay. Seeing no questions from my colleagues, I will just say I'm very happy to have a federal lobbyist. I think this is an opportune time to make sure we have a voice there monitoring what's going on and advocating for our community as we watch the infrastructure bill go forward. Please keep a keen eye on the water opportunities embedded in that. And obviously transportation is also an important issue here in Westminster. But really appreciate your work. Happy to have you on the team and appreciate your work, Mr. Lindsay, in evaluating and selecting this contract. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rip, any follow-up? Okay. Thank you so much. This concludes the open portion of our post-meeting briefing. We do have an executive session. So the two proposed executive sessions for City Council, Mr. Frankel, would you please read the first title into the record?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first executive session for council is to discuss the possible sale of 3 city-owned parcels at the southwest corner of West 73rd Avenue and Lowell Boulevard, and to instruct negotiators as authorized by Westminster Municipal Code 1113C2 and Colorado Revised Statute 246402 4A and E1.
Members of council, having heard the proposed executive session title, I will poll each of you to ascertain whether you support City Council going into an executive session under that subject. I'm going to start with, on my right, Councilor Scully.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilor Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem DeMont?
Yes.
Councilor Seymour?
Yes.
And Councilor Voles?
Yes.
And the mayor as well. Okay, so Mr. Frankel, would you please read the second proposed executive session title into the record?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Upon the conclusion of the first executive session, tonight's agenda contemplates a second executive session that would begin immediately following the resolution of the first. And that second title is an executive session for consultation with the city attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice regarding a claim asserted against the city pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 246402 4B.
Thank you. And just to mix it up, I'm going to pull my colleagues starting on the left. So members of council, you have heard the proposed second executive session title. I'm going to poll each of you to ascertain whether or not you support City Council going into an executive session under that subject. Councilor Rolls.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Councilor Scully.
Yes, ma'am.
And the mayor as well. At this time, it is 9:49. This concludes our regular business or the post-meeting briefing, and we will reconvene an executive session. So